Ella Murphy had been working tirelessly all day. Just before leaving the office in the late afternoon, she stopped by the legal department to speak with the company's attorney. Grace, Mosquito, Ella said, using the nickname she had always used for her, "Draft me a divorce agreement, I want it ready before the weekend." Grace had always been close to Ella. In fact, she had been planning to treat her to dinner to celebrate her recent promotion. But hearing those words, she froze. "For who?" Grace asked, her voice full of disbelief. "For me," Ella replied calmly. Grace was stunned. She did not dare to probe further. Ever since Ella had returned from France, everything about her had changed. She still stood at 5'6", but her presence now carried an imposing air, like someone who had weathered storms and come back unshakable. After a pause, Grace cautiously asked, "Do you want him to walk away with nothing? I know a friend who specializes in divorce cases. If you say the word, we can secure the assets and your son will stay with you." It was on the 5th day after Ella came back to the country that Ethan Walker finally broke under the weight of her indifference. In front of their son, he questioned her. "If you came back, that means you forgave me," Ethan said. "If you forgave me, why do you still treat me like a stranger?" Ella calmly led their son back to his room. Then she returned, reached into her bag, and handed Ethan a document. "Sign this," she said plainly. Her voice carried no emotion, her expression unreadable. Ethan stared at the divorce agreement in disbelief. Then, suddenly overcome with anger, he tore it to pieces. "What is this supposed to mean, Ella?" he shouted. "I told you, I will not get a divorce. Is this because of Henry Sullivan? I heard he was in France too. Are you with him? Is that why you got rid of the baby?" Smack! Ethan's words had crossed the line. Ella had remained composed until that very moment. But now her face darkened and she slapped him hard across the face. "You bastard," Ella cried. "How dare you talk to me about the baby? You really have the nerve to bring that up." The baby had died in her 3rd month in France. Before she left, Ella had taught her son Jack how to use video calls. Every night after she arrived in France, he would clutch the tablet and call her. That night had started the same. But when the screen lit up, it showed nothing but darkness. It took nearly 10 minutes before Jack's tear-streaked face appeared. "Mommy," he sobbed, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "When are you coming home? I don't want Daddy anymore. Daddy is bad. He let a bad lady wear your clothes. I told her not to, but she got mad at me. She said Daddy does not want you anymore. And she told me to call her Mommy." Ella was stunned. As she sat frozen, the image shifted and she saw Ethan's assistant waving at the camera, smiling, wearing Ella's nightgown. "Ella," the woman said sweetly, "just enjoy your time in France. I will take good care of Mr. Walker and Jack." 3 months. She had only been gone 3 months, and Ethan had not even tried to wait. Ella felt disgusted, humiliated, and above all, foolish for ever believing there was hope for them. She ended the call, but the image of that woman in her clothes kept flashing in her mind. Feeling suffocated, she went to shower, but her foot slipped, and she fell hard. The baby was gone. 6 months along, the fetus had already taken shape. She had to go through induced labor. The pain nearly took her life. If not for Henry pulling strings to find the top specialist in France, Ella was convinced she would not have made it. Ethan flew to France when he heard about the loss, but Ella refused to see him. Her mother chased him out with a broom. That child had been Ella's last thread of hope for Ethan, and when it was gone, so was any feeling she had for him. Once she recovered, she returned home and slammed the divorce papers in his face. Ethan refused. He would not agree no matter what she said. Ella was prepared to go to court. But then, their son Jack clung to her, crying and begging, saying if they divorced, he would rather die. Ella was shocked by how extreme his reaction was. She asked him who taught him to say such things. Jack told her it was his grandparents. Furious, Ella went to confront Ethan's parents, but instead of sympathy, his mother looked at her with disdain. "So he cheated, big deal," the older woman snapped. "It was just a fling. Men need entertainment now and then. He only went to another woman because you were not doing your part as a wife. This is your fault, not his. You should be ashamed of yourself." Ella stood there in disbelief. She had always thought of her mother-in-law as a woman of refinement and education. Now her words sounded like a slap across the face. She could have severed all ties with Ethan's family then and there, but she could not ignore her son's fragile state. He was too young to understand betrayal, and he was breaking under the weight of it all, so she decided to wait, but the situation only worsened. No matter how she tried to comfort him, Jack would cry and panic every time she mentioned divorce. She considered secretly filing the papers, but Ethan, that conniving man, kept Jack close to him every hour of the day. Left with no options, Ella returned to France. She wanted to bring Jack with her for proper counseling, but the boy refused. In his eyes, she had become the one breaking the family apart, so the divorce was put on hold. Now that she was back again, seeing Ethan made her stomach turn. She could not stand another second in that house, but her mother begged her to stay. Jack had grown quiet and withdrawn. She said it would be best not to upset him any further, for her son. Ella returned to that miserable house, but her patience had run out. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm, "we have been husband and wife. Let us not make this uglier than it needs to be. Sign the divorce agreement. You keep this house, I will take the one in the suburbs, we each take a car, and we split the savings evenly." She glanced at the torn divorce papers on the floor without a flicker of emotion. Then she pulled another copy from her bag and placed it on the table. She had printed several. Expecting he might do this, "I will have custody of our son," she said. "If you disagree, we will settle it in court. And Ethan, I have proof of your affair. If this goes to court, you will walk away with nothing. Let us end this with dignity. Let us part ways without more harm." After officially filing for divorce, Ella did not have the time or energy to worry about her son's emotions. She simply dropped him off at the Murphy household. The elder members of the Walker family had gone back to their hometown and would not return for at least 2 weeks, which conveniently saved her some immediate trouble. Ella had just been promoted and was buried in work. She urgently needed an assistant. When the HR department submitted a list of candidates, she studied one resume for a long time. It was Zoe, the same Zoe who had been Ethan's assistant. At first, Ella thought she had made a mistake. She looked closely at the photo. Once she was certain, she tossed the resume onto her desk. "She will do," Ella said flatly. During lunch, the newly appointed HR manager came to see her. She explained that Zoe had joined the company a year ago and had taken 10 days off for personal matters back home. She was scheduled to return the next day. This HR manager used to work under Ella's supervision and remained loyal to her. She warned Ella that Zoe was not someone to be trusted. She had a scheming mind and should not be given any significant responsibilities. Zoe's name had not originally been on the candidate list. The HR manager suspected a subordinate had added her by mistake. She had actually selected a few of the top performers for Ella to choose from. In the end, Ella picked 2 candidates, one who was truly capable, and Zoe, whose qualifications were notably lacking. On Zoe's first day back at work, Ella publicly slammed a stack of documents in her face. "You idiot," Ella snapped. "I asked for a proposal, not an academic essay. Did you just copy and paste from a search engine?" On Zoe's second day, Ella deliberately spilled hot coffee on her. "Is this how you plan to kill me? With boiling coffee? You clumsy fool. How did you even get hired?" On the third day, Ella sent her on a 50-kilometer trip to pick up supplies from a factory, then ordered her to go another 20 kilometers to buy desserts for the team. On the fourth day, she made Zoe work overtime to piece together 10 shredded documents from the waste bin, only to ask her to destroy them again the next morning. On the fifth day, Ella told Zoe her proposal was finally acceptable and asked her to present it at the morning meeting. Then, in front of everyone, she ridiculed her. "You look like a decoration, not a professional. This proposal is an absolute mess." On the sixth day, Zoe returned to Ella's office, her face blotchy with tears, holding a resignation letter. Ella called in the HR manager and told her to send Zoe's employment contract to the company's legal advisor, Grace. She instructed Grace to deliver the contract to Zoe personally and remind her that resigning before the end of her contract would result in a hefty penalty. On the seventh day, Zoe finally snapped. She stormed into Ella's office, her voice shaking with fury. "You are doing this on purpose," Zoe cried. "This is personal revenge. If I had known you worked here, I would never have joined. You are cruel and petty." Ella crossed her legs elegantly. raised her cup of coffee, and took a slow sip. She looked at Zoe the way one might look at a ridiculous circus performer. "Of course this is revenge," Ella replied calmly. "If you cannot take it, you are welcome to resign. Or better yet, go talk to the general manager. Are you not good at winning men over? Once you manage to get into his bed and push me out of this chair, then you will have the right to question me." Zoe's body trembled with rage, her face flushed with indignation, but then she suddenly laughed, her expression turning smug. "You think you are so powerful here, Ella, but in the end, you are just a discarded wife. Do you know what Ethan used to say about you when he was with me in bed? He called you boring, said you were a nagging old tiger, the man you loved. He loved me." Ella cut her off with a serene smile and reached into her drawer, pulling out a sleek silver pen, casually rolling it between her fingers. "Is that so?" she said softly. "Well, if Ethan really loves you, that is wonderful. Then all you have to do is get him to sign the divorce papers. Once that is done, I will leave you alone, and on the day you two get married, I will even send a generous gift." Zoe's face paled. "Ethan will not divorce you because of the child," she hissed. "If you did not have a kid together, he would have left you ages ago. He only fired me back then because of your influence. While you were in France, he bought me a house. We have been together for the past 2 years. You had no idea, did you?" Ella's face remained calm. There was not even a flicker of emotion. The only change was the faint, ironic smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Let me remind you of something," she said slowly. "As long as I refuse to step aside, you will always be the other woman. Actually, no, that would be giving you too much credit. At best, you are just a mistress." Zoe's face turned white with fury. The deeper her anger, the wider Ella's smile grew. "You have been with him for 2 years and still have not given him a child. Is there a problem on your side?" Ella asked sweetly. "You really should take better care of your health, in fact. Since the janitor is off today, why do you not go clean all the restrooms on this floor? I will be asking the office to check your work." Ella had been making Zoe's life difficult from the very beginning. Grace, the legal advisor, had even played a little trick with the wording in Zoe's contract. It was just enough to scare Zoe out of resigning, so instead of quitting, she started spreading rumors behind Ella's back. But Ella had been with the company for years. She was seen as one of the old guard, a figure of authority who had the trust of the upper management. More importantly, she was officially recognized by the headquarters as the deputy general manager. No one dared to cross her. As time went on, it became obvious to everyone that Ella was deliberately targeting Zoe. People started whispering, speculating about the reason behind it. Even the general manager called Ella into his office for a talk. Ella did not try to hide the truth. Calmly, she admitted everything. She said Zoe had come between her and her husband. She was getting a divorce. The way she treated Zoe was intentional. Part revenge, part strategy. She wanted to provoke Ethan. If he came to plead for Zoe, it would make things easier for her to finalize the divorce. When Ethan did come to see her, Ella played a recording of Zoe's voice. Then she looked at him and said, "If you refuse to sign the divorce papers, I will post this online. Maybe you can handle public pressure. But do you really want to lose face like that?" Ethan had always cared deeply about appearances. Furious, he lashed out at Zoe, then turned to Ella, trying to explain everything in a heated voice. He insisted he had been manipulated from the beginning, that Zoe had set him up. Ella did not care for his excuses. She warned him clearly, if he still refused to sign, she would bring in the lawyers, and if he tried to use their son against her, then there would be no turning back. It would be war. Somehow, word got out at the company. People learned that Zoe had broken up Ella's marriage. The tide turned almost overnight. Everyone started criticizing Zoe, openly or behind her back. The employees who had once tried to get close to Ella now felt justified in bullying Zoe. Even male colleagues who used to be kind began avoiding her, afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. In just a month, Zoe had become a pariah. She called in sick, but HR marked her as absent without leave. Her paycheck was cut. When she tried to talk to the general manager, he refused to meet her and had her escorted out. In the cafeteria, people scattered away from her like she carried a disease. The lunch lady dumped leftover food into her bowl when she went to the lounge for coffee. Another woman blocked her path and handed her a bottle of green tea with a sarcastic smile. Zoe eventually snapped. One afternoon, as Ella was walking to the underground garage to get her car, Zoe drove toward her in a fit of rage. Ella managed to dodge just in time, but the car still clipped her on the side. When Ella opened her eyes in the hospital, the first face she saw was Henry's. Henry leaned over her, gently checking her eyes before placing a warm hand on her forehead. He asked softly, "How are you feeling? Do you feel any pain?" Ella stared at him, her mind foggy, and it took a few seconds for her to fully come to. She finally asked, "Why are you here?" Henry chuckled as he gently stroked her hair. "Because I work here. I am your orthopedic doctor." Ella sighed and said, "Can I get a different doctor? It feels awkward with you here." 2 years ago, after they landed from a trip, the two had gone their separate ways. Henry had called her a few times. Nothing more than polite check-ins. On the day she had fallen, it was Henry who had called again. Her mother-in-law had answered the phone and told him what had happened. Without a second thought, Henry rushed to the hospital. That was the first time they had seen each other since their farewell at the airport. When Ella was discharged from the hospital in France, it was Henry who came to pick her up. He asked her to give him a chance, told her he wanted to take care of her. Ella understood his feelings, but she turned him down. Since that day, he never brought it up again. They had not seen each other since, and now, their first meeting back in the country was under these circumstances. Ella felt embarrassed and wanted a different doctor. Henry could see that and smiled gently. "I am the best orthopedic doctor here," he said with a light chuckle. "If you pass me up, you will regret it." Then he grew quiet, letting out a soft sigh as he pulled the blanket over her shoulders. His eyes were calm but carried a complicated depth. "Ella," he said gently, "you do not need to feel pressured. Just think of me as your doctor, and do not worry, even though I have not given up on you. I will not try to pursue you again until your divorce is finalized." He continued with quiet determination, "I thought about letting you go, I really did, but life keeps proving to me that we are connected. If you were happily married, I would never have interfered, but if you do get divorced, no matter how many times you turn me down, I will keep trying, even if it takes a lifetime." Ella ended up staying in the hospital for a week. Henry came by so often, countless times a day, that the whole hospital began to whisper about her. People started saying that the woman in room 8 was Dr. Sullivan's girlfriend. Ella had no idea these rumors were flying around. She just noticed that the nurses seemed to change frequently. It was not until Ethan came to visit that she learned about the gossip. He was the one who told her, "Ella, I knew it. You are insisting on a divorce because of that man." "Henry, have the two of you been involved all along?" Ethan burst out in anger. He had gone to Ella's office looking for her, only to be mocked and ridiculed by some of her co-workers. Before he could even process what was happening, someone mentioned that Ella had been hit by a car. Alarmed, he rushed to the hospital. As soon as he asked about her at the reception desk, a nurse passing by overheard and said, "Are you looking for Dr. Sullivan's girlfriend? She is in room 8 on the 5th floor." Ethan froze. "Who is Dr. Sullivan?" he asked. When the nurse replied that it was Henry, Ethan's chest tightened with rage. Without another word, he stormed into the hospital room and exploded in anger. "Ella," he shouted, "you are with him, right? How far have things gone between you? Did you sleep with him? Tell me, did you sleep with him? You are mine, Ella, you belong to me." Ella remained silent as he shouted. After he had vented his fury, she looked at him as though he had lost his mind. "You are sick," Ella said coldly. Ethan lunged at her, grabbing her chin roughly and trying to wipe her lips, his eyes red with fury. "I can see it in your face. You are with him, right? Say it." Ella struggled to push him away, but Ethan's strength was overwhelming. Her lips throbbed with pain, and just when she could barely breathe, Henry burst into the room. "You are hurting her. Can you not see she is weak?" Henry said sternly. He stepped between them, pushed Ethan away, and walked to Ella's side. He noticed the redness and swelling on her lips and reached out gently to touch her face. But before his fingers could make contact, Ethan pulled his hand away violently. "Get your hands off my wife," Ethan roared. "Who do you think you are, touching her like that?" He raised his fist, ready to strike, but Henry was quick and caught his wrist mid-air, holding it tightly. Henry turned to Ella and said gently, "Get some rest." Then he dragged Ethan out of the room. Before leaving, he called over a nurse to change Ella's dressing. Ella could not hear what the two men said after that. But later that evening when Henry returned, there was a fresh bruise on his cheek. She figured they must have fought. "Does it hurt?" Ella asked softly. Henry smiled and said, "No, it does not." Ella looked away and said, "What happened today was Ethan's fault. I apologize on his behalf." Henry studied her face for a moment. "Are you sure you want a divorce? Is there really no future left between you and him?" Ella nodded without hesitation. Henry's eyes lit up with a faint smile. "Then there is no need to apologize for him, if the two of you are no longer husband and wife. He has nothing to do with you." Ella said nothing. Henry continued, "Ella, I have a way to help you get divorced." Ella remained in the hospital for 2 more weeks. Once she was discharged, the very first thing she did was have Zoe Young arrested. She instructed the company's security team to pull the surveillance footage from the parking lot and handed it over to the police. Then she contacted Grace. "I want to press charges," she told him calmly. "I want Zoe behind bars." Grace slapped his chest with confidence and said, "Leave it to me. I will make sure she stays in there for a long time." With Zoe's case moving forward, Ella turned her thoughts to Henry's plan. Before putting it into action, she decided to give Ethan one last chance. She met with him for a serious conversation. Deep down, she still hoped it would not come to using Henry's method. But Ethan was as stubborn as ever. He flatly refused to agree to a divorce. "You are being too cruel to me," he said accusingly. "Zoe drugged me. She set me up. I was not in control of anything. Why can you not forgive me? A man makes one mistake, and it is treated like a death sentence." He leaned forward, his voice rising. "Besides, it was not even a real affair. I was the victim." Ella did not answer. Instead, she pulled out a photograph and threw it in his face. It was a picture of Zoe standing in front of a house. Ethan froze. "Yes," he admitted, panic rising in his voice. "I bought the house, but I had no choice. She had a video of us and threatened to send it to you. I was scared. I just wanted to buy her silence." Ella pulled out another photo and tossed it at him. This one showed Zoe wearing one of Ella's nightgowns, taken 2 years ago. Ethan gritted his teeth in frustration. "I did not even know she was in the house. That night I was at a dinner party. I had no idea Zoe had gone to our home, let alone that she would wear your clothes. I only found out later when our son mentioned it." Ella looked him in the eye. "How did she get a key to our house?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, then mumbled, "I once asked her to take our son home. I gave her the key just that one time. She must have made a copy without telling me." Ella said nothing. Her eyes were cold and distant, and Ethan could tell that, no matter how many excuses he made, there was no way back. Ella looked straight at him and asked, "How many times have you been to Zoe's place?" Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, hesitated, and finally muttered, "I did not go there willingly. Zoe threatened me with a video. I only went there to try to delete it." He buried his face in his hands, groaning in anguish. "I could not let you see that video, Ella. I could not afford a divorce, so every time she threatened me, I gave in. I had no choice." His voice trembled as he continued, "She made countless copies. Every time I deleted one, another would appear on my phone. She said if I did not do what she wanted, she would send it to you. To protect our marriage," he said, "I had to compromise. I never expected Zoe to be so relentless. If you had not sent her to prison, Ella, I swear, I might have killed her myself." To Ella, his whole explanation sounded nothing more than a pathetic joke. He still refused to sign the divorce papers. With a cold stare, she slapped him hard across the face, then kicked him once in the shin before turning on her heel and walking away. Just before leaving, she threw one final remark over her shoulder. "A fly only lands on a cracked egg, and a dog never quits its habit of digging through filth." The very next day, Ethan received a formal letter from her lawyer. Still, he refused to divorce her. At the court hearing, their son Jack burst into tears, wailing and clinging to Ella, begging her not to leave his father. Ella's heart ached, and in that moment, she could not bear to go through with it. She asked for a pause in the proceedings. Afterward, she turned to Mrs. Murphy, "Who brought Jack to court today? I asked you to stay at home with him." Mrs. Murphy replied, "Mr. and Mrs. Walker went to pick him up an hour earlier than I did, that evening. Ella locked herself in her room and stayed there all day. At 8 o'clock, she sent a message to Henry, then she sent one to Ethan. By 10, Ethan arrived at the hotel, following the address she had texted. The room was on the 3rd floor. In her message, she had said she wanted to have a calm conversation about the divorce. She did not want to return to that house, so she suggested they meet at the hotel instead. At the front desk, Ethan was told a room key had been left for him. Hopeful and relieved, he took the key and made his way to the room. He imagined she had changed her mind, but the moment he opened the door, he froze. His blood seemed to stop in his veins. Scattered across the floor were pieces of men's and women's clothing. On the bed lay 2 naked bodies tangled together in each other's arms. Even more shocking were the faces he saw. Both of them were people he knew. Ella opened her eyes lazily and glanced at Ethan without a trace of panic. Then she shifted under the blanket and nestled closer into Henry's chest. In a soft, sleepy voice, she said, "Why are you here? I thought I told you not to come." She reached over and tapped Henry's cheek. "Give me your phone, please." Henry smiled, tilted her chin up affectionately, kissed her on the lips, then picked his phone off the nightstand and handed it to her. The two of them continued their little act as if no one else were in the room. Ethan stood there, his face pale with fury. Barely able to keep himself from exploding, Ella leaned comfortably against Henry's shoulder. Henry gently wrapped his arm around her. "Oh no," Ella suddenly said, looking at the screen. The message didn't send. She turned to Henry and pouted, giving him a playful glare. "This is your fault," she said. "I told you to take it slow, but no, you had to rush everything. Now look what happened. The message telling him not to come never got sent. How awkward." Then she turned to Ethan and smiled sweetly. "Well, you caught us in bed. What are you standing there for? You should be taking photos already." After Ethan stormed out, Henry threw back the blanket. Both of them were still fully clothed from the waist down. Ella's upper body was wrapped in a tube top. Henry picked up her jacket from the floor and helped her put it on. Then he put on his own shirt. Henry sat beside her and asked, "Do you regret it?" Ella shook her head. "No. Not if it gets him to finally sign the papers. I do not regret anything." She fell into silence, staring blankly ahead, her thoughts elsewhere. Henry watched her for a while. Then, in a sudden motion, he leaned over and pinned her gently beneath him. "Ella," he said softly, "let us stop pretending. Let us make this real." Ella's eyes widened in shock. She scrambled out from under him and ran. Henry sat back, watching her flee. A wry smile touched his lips. He had expected as much. He never meant to take advantage of her. He just wanted to tease her, nothing more. 2 weeks later, Ethan finally signed the papers. He said he could not get over what he saw at the hotel that day. Ella found his words ridiculous. If that was truly the case, she thought, she should have followed Henry's advice from the very beginning. Once the divorce was finalized, Ella blocked Ethan's number, deleted him from every contact list, removed him from her social media, and erased every trace of him from her life. She sold their suburban house and bought a small apartment closer to her office. She moved in with her son, Jack. Although she was granted full custody, Ella never stopped Ethan's parents from seeing their grandson. The elderly couple came in tears, begging her to reconsider. But Ella ignored their pleas. Later, it seemed they had learned from Ethan about her relationship with Henry. They came storming into her apartment, accusing her of betrayal, shouting that she had been unfaithful during the marriage and smeared their son's name. Ella tried explaining multiple times, but their outbursts only grew worse. Finally, she had security escort them out of the building and told them not to return. Ethan's mother caused a scene in the courtyard below, yelling and crying. Eventually, Ella's own mother came to confront her. Neither woman was willing to back down. They ended up grabbing each other by the hair and got into a full-blown fight right in front of the building. In the end, Ella's mother came out victorious, and Ethan had to pull his mother away. After that, the Walkers never showed up again. The peaceful, happy life they once shared had completely collapsed. Everyone shed their polite masks, revealing their true faces. Ella could only sigh and accept that this was the reality of life. After the divorce, she poured all her time and energy into work and caring for her son. But Jack was not doing well. He became even more withdrawn. more sensitive, and rarely spoke. Some days, Ella would come home from a long, stressful day at work, only to find her son unresponsive and quiet. Frustration would build up in her chest until she snapped and raised her voice. Jack would burst into tears. And then she would force herself to calm down, hold him in her arms, and soothe him gently. Toward the end of the year, things grew worse. Work became overwhelming. Jack started refusing to go to school. On top of that, Ella's father had an accident while out for a walk and had to be hospitalized. Her mother had to stay at the hospital to look after him. Ella was stretched thin, barely holding things together, with her hands full at the office and Jack refusing to cooperate. She could only ask her mother to take him to the hospital during the day. In the evenings, she would go pick him up. One weekend, her company organized a dinner, but Ella was too exhausted to attend. She went straight home and collapsed onto the bed. In her sleep, she sensed someone entering the room. Startled, she sat up in alarm, thinking it was a burglar, but in the living room, she saw Jack standing there. Her heart sank. She had forgotten to pick him up from the hospital. She rushed over, scooped him into her arms, and asked, "How did you get home, sweetheart?" Jack pointed toward the kitchen and said softly, "Uncle Sullivan brought me back." Ella turned around, stunned. Henry was standing there, carrying a bowl. When he saw her, he offered a gentle smile. Jack was restless at the hospital. Henry said kindly, "So I brought him home. You have not eaten yet, have you? Go wash up. Dinner is ready." Ella stood frozen for a moment, watching Henry's tall figure move gracefully across the room. How long had it been since someone cooked for her? She could hardly remember. Probably back in their first year of marriage, when Ethan used to wait for her with warm meals after her long work shifts. That had been 7 or 8 years ago. She had almost forgotten that Ethan even knew how to cook. On the table were all the dishes she and Jack loved. She looked at Henry with a hint of surprise. He explained with a smile that he had asked her mother about her preferences before leaving the hospital. Henry told her to focus on work and not worry about her parents. He had already arranged for nurses to look after her father and had spoken with the doctors as well. Ella was deeply touched and thanked him sincerely. Henry just reached out, patted her head lightly, and said she should get some rest. Ella looked at him quietly, her heart full. She knew that ever since the divorce, Jack had grown wary of any man getting close to her. When he had opposed the separation so fiercely, it was largely because Ethan's parents had planted the idea in his mind that Ella would remarry and abandon him. Strangely though, Jack seemed to accept Henry without resistance. During dinner, he even served food onto Henry's plate and later turned to Ella and said, "I want to go back to school tomorrow. Can Uncle Sullivan take me?" Ella felt relieved but also puzzled. She asked Henry jokingly if he had cast a spell on her son. Henry chuckled and said with a twinkle in his eye, "It is a secret between men. You just need to take care of your work, eat well, and rest. Leave the rest to me." At the end of the evening, she asked him how he had gotten into the apartment. He said her mother had given him the spare key. Ella said nothing more. After dinner, she walked him to the door, but instead of heading out of the building, Henry walked directly to the apartment across the hall. He turned back and smiled warmly. "Ella," he said, "I live just here. If you need anything, just knock, or you can come in anytime. The code is your birthday." Ella stood there in silence, watching him walk away, her eyes following the steady rhythm of his steps. Jack had become Henry's little shadow. No matter how hard Ella tried, she could not figure out what kind of secret connection the two shared. She asked Henry, but he simply smiled and said, "It is a man's secret." She asked her son, and he replied with the same phrase, "It is a man's secret." No matter who she asked, neither of them would tell her the truth. Ella had always tried to keep a polite distance from Henry, but it became increasingly difficult. Jack found every excuse to run over to Henry's place. When she finished cleaning and could not find Jack, he was at Henry's. When she came out of the study and her son was missing, he was at Henry's. Even when she called home and no one picked up, she would go next door and knock, and sure enough, Jack would be there without fail. What truly puzzled her was how Jack had come to see Henry as a sort of hero. He idolized him, relied on him, adored him far too much. Sometimes, Ella even felt as if she were not Jack's real mother. Henry, strangely enough, seemed more like Jack's father. For example, when a pipe burst in the house. She had just found a plumber's number when Jack ran out the door and knocked on Henry's. He grabbed Henry's hand, looked back at her with a cheerful smile, and said, "Uncle Sullivan can fix anything." Or when Ella came home from work, ready to help Jack with his homework, he would already be rushing toward Henry's house with his backpack. On his way out, he would grab the fruit she bought and say, "Uncle Sullivan teaches better, the fruit is for him." Or when she planned to take Jack to the amusement park, he would call Henry in excitement. But when Ella said sternly that Henry could not come, Jack burst into tears, ran into his room, and shouted, "If Uncle Sullivan is not going, then I am not going either." Or when Ella was exhausted and fell asleep on the couch after work, she would wake to find dinner already made. Henry would be sitting nearby playing with Jack. The two of them waiting for her at the table. Jack would hold her hand with one hand and Henry's with the other, smiling up at her and saying, "Uncle Sullivan made your favorite, 8 treasure rice." Or when she fell ill, Jack's first instinct was never to call her mother or a doctor, it was always Henry. In her feverish days, she would always open her eyes to see Henry by her side. He would stay the whole night, taking care of her, not leaving until her fever broke, and before he left, he would gently tell her, "There is warm millet porridge on the stove, eat it when you wake." Or when there was a parent-child day at school, Jack finished breakfast early and immediately went to knock on Henry's door. Ella tried to stop him, reminding him not to trouble others. Jack's eyes turned red with frustration, and he looked crushed. "If Uncle Sullivan does not go," he said, "then Mommy, you should not go either." That was the day she lost her temper. Furious, she raised her hand and hit him. Jack cried in heartbreak, and though she instantly regretted it and tried to hug him, he pushed her away. "Other kids have both a mom and a dad," he shouted. "I do not have a dad anymore, I only have Uncle Sullivan. If you go alone, I will be laughed at." After that fight, Jack packed his things and moved into Henry's home. Ella felt helpless, trapped in a situation she could not fix. She did not want to further upset her son. So she quietly asked Henry to look after him for the time being. She threw herself into work, turning her life into a whirlwind just to stay busy. But each night, she came home to an empty house, drowning her loneliness in alcohol. One evening, Henry let himself in. She had not turned on the lights. She was curled up in a corner of the couch, lost in silence. Henry said nothing at first. He quietly picked up the empty bottles scattered across the floor, then sat beside her and gently touched her hair. His voice was soft as he said, "Ella, do you know why I brought Jack home from the hospital that day?" Ella shook her head and took another swig from her bottle. Henry took it from her hands, and she tried to grab it back. "Ella," he said gently, "I will only say this once. If you keep drowning yourself like this, then whatever is between you and Jack, you will have to figure it out on your own." She stopped struggling. Henry picked up a blanket, covered her with it, and guided her head to rest on his shoulder. "You getting divorced from Ethan was a huge blow to Jack," he said. "Children are more sensitive than we think. They understand far more than they let on. That day, after I finished my rounds at the hospital, I was walking back to my office when I saw Jack sitting alone on the rooftop." Henry's voice dropped lower. "Ella, that day, Jack was ready to jump." Ella sat frozen, her face pale as a sheet, her body trembled uncontrollably. Her pupils shrinking with shock, tears streamed down her cheeks without end, her spirit teetering on the edge of collapse. Henry gently pulled her into his arms, one hand resting softly on the back of her head, soothing her like a father would a frightened child. In a low, careful voice, as if afraid his words might shatter her completely, Henry said, "Jack told me that while you and Ethan were busy with the divorce, his grandparents kept pressuring him to choose between his parents. They grabbed his arms so tightly it left marks, but no one even noticed. His other grandmother was too busy taking care of his grandfather, his father was off with another woman, and his mother, well, she was too busy to see him at all," he said. "He said it felt like no one in the world loved him anymore." Henry paused for a moment, giving Ella time to breathe. Then, gently, he continued, "Jack said Zoe came to his school. She stood there, in front of his teachers and classmates, claiming to be his new mother. The other kids laughed at him, they teased him, saying his parents were divorced and no one wanted him. That was why he did not want to go to school anymore. Henry's voice grew even softer. He said his grandparents told him that if you married again, you would have new children and send him away to an orphanage. Then, when you asked him to go with your mother to the hospital, he thought you were abandoning him. While he was there, he overheard someone arguing. One voice said that jumping off a building would make all your problems disappear. That is why he went up to the roof. Ella broke down in Henry's arms, sobbing until she could barely breathe. He said nothing more, only held her close and let her cry, his hand gently stroking her hair, offering silent comfort. Once her tears began to slow and her breathing steadied, she looked up and asked if Henry had said something to their son. Why was Jack so attached to him all of a sudden? Henry nodded. He had indeed spoken with Jack, but he told her gently, that is not what matters most. What matters is how Jack feels, when he is ready to talk to you, when he tells you himself. Then you will know you have been forgiven. He assured her Jack would return home in a day or two. You do not need to worry too much. Henry said softly, no matter how angry a child gets, no matter how much he acts out, the person he loves most will always be his mother. Exhausted from crying and the weight of her emotions, Ella eventually fell asleep in Henry's arms after quietly telling him everything that had been bottled up inside her. Henry carried her gently to her bedroom, tucked her in, and placed a tender kiss on her forehead. 10 minutes later, he returned carrying Jack in his arms. The little boy climbed onto the bed, lying quietly near the pillow, his eyes swollen from crying. Henry wiped away his tears and placed his small hand into Ella's palm. Henry spoke in a warm and steady voice. Jack, remember this. There is no one in this world who loves you more than your mother. You are a strong young man now, and strong boys protect their moms. If something hurts you, you must talk to her about it. She only has you now. If even you stop caring for her, it would break her heart. Jack nodded solemnly, his red eyes still glistening with tears. He rubbed at his face, then looked up at Henry, blinking with purpose. As if making an important decision, Uncle Sullivan, he asked softly, do you love my mommy? I do, Henry replied without hesitation. Jack's eyes lit up instantly. He grabbed Henry's hand, his little fingers curling around it with hope. Then will you marry her? He asked brightly. Can you be my daddy? Henry smiled as he ruffled Jack's hair. Uncle Sullivan would be honored. But Jack, your mommy does not love Uncle Sullivan. I cannot force her, no matter how much I want to. In the darkness, beneath the blanket, Ella's eyelashes quivered, her fingers curled ever so slightly around Jack's hand. After Ella's father was discharged from the hospital, her mother made a practical decision. To help care for Ella and her son, she moved both herself and her husband into Ella's apartment. It was a great relief for Ella, but soon, something peculiar began to happen. First, it had been Jack, who followed Henry everywhere like a shadow. Now, it was her parents. Ever since they moved in, the elder Murphys could not stop singing Henry's praises. He was always on their lips, and they spoke of him as though he were their own flesh and blood. Ella's mother cooked every day and insisted that Jack go across the hall to invite Henry to join them for dinner. He lives alone, it cannot be easy, she would say with sympathy. At the table, she treated him with the warmth usually reserved for a son. After meals, Henry would sit and play chess with Ella's father, who often laughed so hard it brought tears to his eyes. Ella could no longer control how things were unfolding. That evening, Mrs. Murphy gently pulled her into the bedroom and, without delay, launched into a list of all the wonderful things about Dr. Henry Sullivan. She went on and on, praising his character, his dedication, his gentle nature, and then, with a hopeful look, began dropping hints. Ella, she said, her voice warm but serious, be honest with me. What are you really thinking? Dr. Sullivan has made his feelings clear. He truly cares about you. But what about you? Do you like him? Do you like him? That one simple question caught Ella off guard. Did she like Henry? She was not sure. She did not know for certain if what she felt was love, but she could not deny that. For many months now, her heart had been quietly stirred. When she had been sick, it was Henry who had appeared first. In her weakest moments, when she most needed comfort and care, when her heart was at its most fragile, it was Henry who had stayed by her side. Had he come to her with grand gestures or bold declarations of love, Ella might have turned away. She might have assumed he had ulterior motives, might have dismissed him entirely. But Henry had done the opposite. He treated her with the deepest respect. His presence was calm, steady, and filled with a kind of quiet affection she could not ignore. In all these years, aside from Ethan during their early courtship and the honeymoon phase of their marriage, only Henry had made her heart skip a beat. What he gave her was not dazzling passion or poetic promises, but something far rarer, a profound sense of security. His shoulders were the kind she could imagine leaning on, and yet, she could not give him an answer. She felt uncertain. She did not know how long her feelings would last. She was afraid that this might just be a fleeting moment of gratitude, not true affection. She was afraid that even if they got together, things might change again. She had already been through too much. She was tired, and she could not afford another emotional storm. Seeing the hesitation in Ella's eyes, Mrs. Murphy let out a sigh and gently patted her shoulder. "My dear," she said softly, "life is long, but a man like Dr. Sullivan only comes once in a lifetime. Ethan left you with a desert in your heart, but Henry, he is the one planting an oasis in that desert. He understands your silences, stays beside you quietly, and gives you warmth when no one else does. If you let him go, you may never meet someone again who knows how to love you slowly and truly, every single day." After Mrs. Murphy left, Jack tiptoed into the room. He climbed into bed beside Ella and snuggled into her arms, his voice soft, sweet, and full of innocent hope. "Mommy," he said, "Uncle Sullivan said he really likes you. Will you marry him? That way I can have a daddy again, and someone to love you too." Ella looked down at her son and asked the same question she had asked before. "Jack, why do you like Henry so much? What did he say to you that day on the hospital rooftop? Why did you agree to come back with him?" Jack looked up at her, his eyes bright and serious. "Mommy, I know I was wrong. I will not make you worry again," he said first, his voice full of guilt. Then he began, eagerly and sincerely, to tell her all the reasons why he liked Henry. "Mommy, I love Uncle Sullivan because I love you the most," he said earnestly. "Daddy brought that bad lady home and made you cry. I did not like Daddy. Grandpa and Grandma say mean things about you. I do not like them either. Only Uncle Sullivan never said anything bad about you." He told her that Henry said he was a real little man. That Henry taught him important lessons. That Henry took him to the amusement park, showed him dinosaurs, played games with him, helped with homework, and taught him how to love his mother. He said Henry always seemed to know exactly what he was feeling. That Henry went to school to talk to kids who were being mean to him. That Henry made him feel proud and liked at school. He said Henry noticed when his pencil broke, when he fell and scraped his knee, when his clothes were dirty, or when he was feeling down. He would always comfort him, cheer him up, stay by his side, and give him a warm hug whenever he was sad. He said, "Mommy, Dad should be like Uncle Sullivan. If I could be his son, I would be so happy." Ella listened to every word, her heart swelling with emotion. Tears rolled down her cheeks. In that moment, she realized how unqualified she and Ethan had been as parents. Ethan always left the boy with his mother, barely present. And she, though she always believed she loved Jack deeply, had often let work and daily stress take over, forgetting that what her son needed most was time, attention, and love. She thought of Henry again, of his kind, steady eyes, so deep and full of warmth. Her heart softened, and for the first time in a long while, a quiet sense of peace settled over her. It was the 9th day of September, Jack's birthday. Feeling a deep sense of guilt toward her son, Ella had arranged for a half-month break from work. She wanted to take him on a special trip, just the two of them. Disneyland was at the top of his wish list, and he had never stopped talking about the endless grasslands of the northern plains. On the morning of his birthday, Ella started preparing early. She picked up a cake from the bakery and carried it home, her mood light and full of anticipation. But as she approached her building, all her joy vanished in an instant. Standing by the entrance, in a crumpled light blue shirt, was a figure she recognized immediately. It was Ethan. Before she could turn away and leave, Ethan rushed up and grabbed her arm. With one forceful pull, he drew her into his arms. "Ella, I am sorry. Please come back to me," Ethan said desperately. "I cannot breathe without you. I cannot live without you. I miss you so much. Everything I did, everything, was for you. I can forgive you for being with Henry. I really can." Let us just forgive each other, start over. I still love you, Ella. I always have." His voice cracked as he reached for her again, trying to embrace her once more. Ella quickly stepped back, frowning in alarm. She gave him a hard kick and pushed him away. It had been more than a year since she had last seen him. But the man before her now was no longer the confident and arrogant Ethan she once knew. His face looked worn, his beard unkempt, his eyes dull and lifeless. That once sharp suit he used to wear with pride had been replaced by a wrinkled shirt reeking of cigarette smoke. Ella stared at him, and surprisingly, she felt nothing, no pain, no anger, no warmth, only a faint trace of pity and a quiet sorrow for what had once been. Time, she realized, had washed away even their most beautiful memories. There was no going back. "Mom." The sudden sound of her son's voice startled her. Ella turned around and was met by Henry's deep, unreadable gaze. For a brief second, her heart fluttered in panic. She rushed forward, still holding the birthday cake, and tried to explain. "I did not invite him here," she said quickly. "I have nothing to do with him anymore. I pushed him away. I did not hug him. Really, I did not. Please, do not misunderstand." She was not even sure what she was saying. She only knew she needed Henry to know the truth. Henry said nothing. He simply handed their son to her, gently brushed her hair back, and said softly, "Take him upstairs." That night, when Henry came home, there was a fresh bruise on his face. Ella went to get some ointment, as she gently dabbed at his injury. Henry asked with a quiet smile, "Does this mean you feel sorry for me?" Ella hesitated, not knowing how to answer. Henry took a step back and slowly opened his arms. His eyes, shadowed by soft lamplight, were hard to read. "Ella," he said gently, "I may not be able to wait any longer. If you are ready to accept me, come into my arms now." Something inside her almost responded immediately. That embrace. It was too tempting, too warm, too safe. She wanted to throw herself into it, to give up everything and surrender. But her rational mind held her back. She hesitated, torn between the pull of her heart and the fear of uncertainty. Henry's expression dimmed, slowly. He lowered his arms and, as always, gently touched the top of her head. "Ella," he said softly, "you still owe me one hug." That night, Ella lay awake, tossing and turning. She could not forget the look in Henry's eyes, the way his hands had dropped in disappointment, the quiet sadness in his voice. Early the next morning, she loaded the packed suitcases into the car. It was time to begin the trip she had promised her son, a journey of 2 weeks, just the two of them. She needed the time to think. When she returned, she would have an answer. But just as she was about to start the engine, her son came running toward her in a panic, eyes red from crying. "Mom, Uncle Sullivan is leaving. He is going far, far away. I just called him. He is still at the hospital. Let us go find him, please." Ella froze in place. Her whole body went cold. "Ella, I may not be able to wait any longer." Now she understood what he had meant. That was his goodbye. He really was leaving. She jumped into the car and sped all the way to the hospital, but she was too late. "Dr. Sullivan left this morning," the head nurse said with a sigh. "He used to be with Doctors Without Borders. He came back 3 years ago because he met someone who made him want to settle down. No one knows why, but he decided to return to that life. We only found out this morning. There was not even time to say goodbye." Ella stood there in shock, her mind a blur. Without thinking, she turned around, got back in the car, and headed straight to the airport. Henry's phone kept ringing, but no one answered. Panicked, Ella rushed up the stairs from the first floor to the second, then from the second to the third, calling his name as she searched every hallway. Her voice echoed through the building, growing more desperate with each passing second. By the time she reached the third floor, she was out of breath, her heart pounding wildly. Still, there was no sign of him. Desperation took over. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed onto the floor, covering her face with her hands. She began to sob. She wanted to run downstairs and use the loudspeaker to call for him, but her body would not move. Then, from behind her, a familiar voice called her name. Startled, she turned around quickly, and there he was. Henry. Tears burst from her eyes again, but this time they were mixed with joy. She laughed and cried as she scrambled to her feet. They stood about 10 feet apart. Henry looked at her gently and asked, "Why did you come after me?" Ella sniffled and replied, "I came to return the hug I owe you." Henry chuckled and dropped his suitcase. He opened his arms wide again and said with a smile, "Ella, if you are sure, then come to me. But no changing your mind, this time." Ella did not hesitate, ignoring the stares around them. She ran straight into his embrace, throwing her arms around him. She held him tightly and cried while pounding lightly on his back. "You idiot," she said through her tears. "You scared me to death. I thought you really left." Henry wrapped his arms around her and rested his head on her shoulder. His eyes were warm, shining with emotion. Over her shoulder, he saw Jack in the distance, grinning proudly and flashing him a victory sign with his fingers. Henry chuckled fondly at the boy's mischievous triumph. He whispered into Ella's ear, "I told you, you owed me a hug. I have waited too long for this. There is no way I would give up that easily." Ella lifted her head from his chest. Her eyes were still moist, filled with gratitude and peace. A smile bloomed across her face, and her cheeks turned a gentle shade of pink. She wrapped her arms around his neck and said softly, "Buy one, get one free, no returns allowed." Henry grinned. "That is exactly what I was hoping for," she teased. "So, after waiting this long, one hug is not really enough, is it?" Trying to suppress his laughter. Henry glanced at Jack and gave him a playful wink. The little boy got the message and immediately covered his eyes with his hands. Henry leaned down and kissed Ella, tender and slow, filled with affection and warmth. Later, when Henry handed her a plane ticket, Ella was stunned. That was when she realized everything had been planned. He and Jack had been working together all along, keeping the secret from her. He had quietly asked their son to check her phone for flight information, found the flight number, and booked a seat on the same one. "My love," Henry said with a grin, "look at this. I even got the seat on your right. I told you we were meant to be." Ella blushed and playfully swatted his arm. "Who is your love? Do not call me that." She held Jack's hand, the little boy bouncing with excitement. While Henry firmly held onto her other hand, with his free hand, he pushed the suitcase along and leaned in to whisper, "Ella," Jack said, "he wants a little sister, later." Ella asked him quietly, "Why were you so sure that I was the one?" Henry only smiled and said nothing. 3 years ago, at a school reunion, he heard she would be attending. That was the reason he came back from abroad. If Ella had been happily married, perhaps he would have stayed a lifelong volunteer doctor, traveling the world without roots or attachments. He was an orphan. He had no home, no family. Only one memory remained steady in his heart, a soft glow like moonlight. He had fallen for her in high school at first sight, and ever since, she had never left his thoughts. He could never quite explain why. He only knew that she was the one who felt right, and now, finally, his waiting had paid off.